Next up on our IQP Reflections feature, I meet with Emma Bennett of the WPI field hockey team. Emma, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rusty.
So can you tell me about your project, please?
Yeah, so I was supposed to go to Greece in term, and unfortunately, we found out 3 days before we were supposed to leave that we weren't able to go because of the coronavirus. So we were gonna work on a project over in Greece having to do with a lake that was polluted. We were gonna interview a bunch of different stakeholders around the lake, but because of the virtuality of everything that had to be in term, we ended up shifting our project to topics relating to the coronavirus. So our advisors let us choose any topic that we wanted to relating to the coronavirus. So I ended up choosing to interview a bunch of Appalachian Trail through hikers and how the coronavirus had impacted their hikes throughout the year. So some people had to get off of the trail due to the virus, but some people still stayed on the trail, even though there were restrictions and warnings to get off of the trail. So that was really interesting to learn.
So that's a pretty neat. You're impacted by the coronavirus. I mean, I feel for you and everybody else. You have these grand plans to go to Greece, which I assume was one of your top choices, right?
Yeah, yep.
And then all of a sudden you're home and you're doing your IQP, yet you were able to pivot and you're able to now work with people that are also impacted by COVID. So did that weigh on your decision, or was that just an idea that you had and it was just a coincidence? How did you purposefully want to be connected with how people reacted?
So I love hiking. I love being outside. So that kind of pushed me to do something with the Appalachian Trail. It also kind of like opened my eyes into that I can actually hike the Appalachian Trail, because that's like something that I wanted to do. So it was really interesting to connect with all the people that I interviewed. I ended up interviewing around like 20 to 25 hikers. So it was just really interesting to hear everybody's stories and just see how everybody was impacted by the virus, because it can range from like not being impacted by the virus at all to like being extremely impacted. So it was really cool to see that range of who was impacted.
Were you surprised with the results that you found, that it was wide ranging?
Yeah, so I interviewed a couple of hikers who had like come to the US internationally. So there was a couple from Australia, there was a woman from Germany, and there's also a couple from Denmark. So it was really weird just to like hear, not weird, but like it was interesting to hear how, like, because they were impacted a lot, having to the Australian couple had to go back to Chicago and stay with a couple that they had met on the trail, and then they ended up biking across the whole United States, which is really cool. The couple from Denmark ended up getting off the trail for a couple of weeks, and then they ended up getting back on and finishing their whole journey on the Appalachian Trail. And so did the woman from Germany. She took a couple weeks off, like right in the heat of it, and then ended up finishing, which was really, really cool.
Yeah. Now, were these phone interviews or were these Zoom interviews? How did you conduct these?
Yeah, so it was a pretty broad range. I did a couple on Zoom. I did a couple over the phone. I did a couple on Facebook Messenger, just like what everybody was comfortable with.
Great. And what was a typical day for you like?
So during the heat of the IQP, I had scheduled around 2 or 3 interviews a day. So I'd have one around like 9 o'clock, and then I'd interview them, and then with their permission, I recorded it. And then after that, I transcribed the interview to have notes for it. And then after that, I would have another interview around 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and then do the exact same thing. So once I had all the notes from interviews, I then put that all into my final report with pictures and stuff, it came out really good.
And you had a wonderful experience with your team and your advisors. You want to talk about them?
Yeah, so my advisors kind of had a new idea of combining our class into one group, because originally, like, all IQPs are students in groups of 4, but because of the circumstance, they decided to have us all kind of work in a big group. So we were split up into cohorts, and then we all brought our final project together. So it was a final project of 24 reports, which was kind of really cool to see. Everybody worked so awesome together. My advisors were amazing. They really inspired us and gave us
You
a
want
lot
to tell us
of
who they were?
Professor Robert Hirsch and Professor Melissa Bells were our advisors. So thank you so much.
Outstanding. And do you feel any extra satisfaction about accomplishing this after having to pivot, you know, from being set on going to Greece and doing one thing to have to, is that, I know there's got to be some disappointment, but is there a sense of accomplishment there too?
Yeah, it was definitely like really disappointing at the beginning. Our advisors actually had us do a couple of reflections at the beginning, just like see where we were at the beginning. And then we did more at the end just to see like how we had thought about it over the course of the term. But it was definitely an adjustment, like having to do the whole IQP at home. I was up in my room doing all these interviews with my mom popping in from the back. So it was definitely rough, or it was definitely hard. It was a lot of hard work, but it was really satisfying at the end to like know I had this big final report, and that it actually made like a difference.
Last two questions. Will you walk the Appalachian Trail at some point?
That is my hope. Whether it's a couple years after graduation or 10 years down the road, I really want to do it. So.
Well, let's do an update video on that one, okay?
Sounds good.
Afterwards. And I assume that this has a great ending. I assume the grade was what you wanted?
Yeah, it was. I ended up getting an A, so put a lot of hard work into it, and it was really worth it.
Congratulations, Abby. What a wonderful experience. Great job for you and your group to be able to pivot from your thrill of getting to go to Greece to being able to still do a great IQP. And I look forward, hopefully I'm still around to do that interview in a few years after you walk the Appalachian Trail.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Thank you, Abby. And we will catch up with you soon.
Thank you.